Learning is not the same thing as exposure. A person can sit through a lesson, read a procedure, or watch a demonstration and still be unable to use the idea later. In practical terms, learning means a durable change in understanding, skill, judgment, or behavior. Something has changed in what the learner can explain, decide, notice, perform, or improve. That difference matters because many training programs accidentally measure attendance, completion, or familiarity when the real goal is usable capability. There are levels of progress. Exposure means the learner has encountered the idea. Familiarity means the idea feels recognizable. Recall means the learner can bring information back from memory. Usable capability means the learner can apply the idea in a real situation with the normal messiness of time pressure, incomplete information, and competing priorities. A course that only tells people what to know may create familiarity, but it rarely creates confident performance by itself. Effective learning is active. People pay attention, connect new information to what they already know, form meaning, practice, receive feedback, adjust, and try again in a slightly different context. Good learning design starts with the work people need to do, not just the information they need to hear. When the desired performance is clear, the lesson can focus attention on the important relationships, give learners enough practice to build confidence, and help them transfer the skill beyond the course. A useful test is to ask what evidence would prove the learner can do the thing. If the outcome is only, they heard the message, the design will usually stop too early. If the outcome is, they can recognize a situation, choose an approach, explain a trade-off, or complete a task, the course needs examples and practice that let those behaviors appear. Learners do not receive new information as a blank slate. They interpret it through what they already know, what they believe, the vocabulary they recognize, and the examples they have seen before. Prior knowledge can help because it gives new ideas a place to attach. It can also get in the way when a learner has a misconception, an incomplete model, or an assumption that works in one context but fails in another. A mental model is an internal understanding of how something works. It may be simple, detailed, accurate, incomplete, or wrong in important ways. Experts often have rich models that let them see patterns quickly. Beginners may see the same material as a list of isolated facts because they have not yet built the relationships that make the topic coherent. This is one reason an expert explanation can feel obvious to the expert and confusing to the learner. Better instruction activates prior knowledge before adding complexity. That can be as simple as asking what learners already do, naming common assumptions, defining important vocabulary, or using a familiar analogy before introducing the formal concept. The goal is not to shame weak models. The goal is to make them visible, test them against examples, and help learners replace them with models that are more useful for the work they actually need to perform. This is also why vocabulary matters. A learner who misses one key term may lose the thread of an entire explanation. Good courses define terms when they first matter, revisit them in context, and show how the terms relate to actions. The learner is not just collecting definitions. They are building a map that helps them navigate the subject. Attention is limited. Learners can only select and process a small amount of information at one time, especially when the material is new. Working memory is the mental workspace where people hold information while they compare, interpret, calculate, decide, or follow a procedure. When too much arrives at once, the learner may still be trying hard, but the mental workspace becomes crowded and the important relationship is harder to see. Cognitive load is the mental effort required to hold, process, and use information. Some load is necessary because the topic itself may be complex. Other load is avoidable. Unnecessary detail, cluttered visuals, inconsistent terminology, distracting side stories, and poorly sequenced explanations all consume attention without helping the learner build capability. The issue is not whether a course feels busy. The issue is whether the learner can focus on the decision, pattern, or action that matters. Good learning design manages load deliberately. It introduces concepts in a useful sequence, chunks material into meaningful units, removes visual and verbal clutter, and gives learners enough context to understand why the current idea matters. It also avoids dumping every exception into the first explanation. The aim is not to make learning shallow. The aim is to make the important structure visible, so learners spend their effort on understanding instead of fighting the presentation. One practical move is to separate must-know structure from nice-to-know detail. Learners need the core pattern first: what it is, why it matters, how to recognize it, and what to do with it. Once that pattern is stable, exceptions and edge cases become easier to place. Without the core pattern, every detail competes for the same limited attention. Memory is easier to understand when we connect it to work. Short-term memory helps us hold something briefly. Long-term memory lets us keep knowledge, patterns, and procedures available beyond the moment. Encoding is the process of forming memory in the first place. Retrieval is the act of bringing information back when we need it. Forgetting is normal, which means durable learning needs more than a single clean explanation. Rereading can feel productive because the material becomes familiar while it is in front of us. That feeling can be misleading. Familiarity is not the same as being able to recall the idea tomorrow or apply it under pressure. Retrieval practice strengthens learning because the learner has to pull the idea back from memory, not merely recognize it on the page. Even short recall activities can reveal what is clear, what is missing, and what needs another example. Spacing improves durability by revisiting material across time instead of concentrating all practice in one sitting. Cues also matter. People remember and apply ideas more reliably when practice includes the kinds of signals they will encounter in real work. A well-designed learning experience gives learners repeated chances to recall, explain, choose, and apply. It prepares them to remember before the skill is needed, not after the work has already become urgent. For course design, this means review should not be treated as filler. A brief pause to recall the main idea, compare two cases, or explain the next step can be more valuable than another page of information. Retrieval gives the learner and the designer evidence. It shows whether the idea is available without the answer sitting directly in front of the learner. Practice is the bridge between knowing about something and being able to do it. A learner may understand an explanation and still struggle when asked to perform the task independently. That gap is normal. Performance grows when learners see examples, try guided exercises, make decisions, receive feedback, correct mistakes, and repeat the work with variation. Practice turns abstract understanding into usable skill. Deliberate practice is focused practice with a clear target. It is not repeating easy tasks on autopilot. It asks the learner to work on a specific capability, notice the result, and adjust. Worked examples help early in learning because they show how an experienced person approaches the task. Guided exercises then let learners complete part of the work with support. Independent application comes later, when learners are ready to make more of the decisions themselves. Feedback is most useful when it helps learners improve, not merely when it judges them. A score can tell someone how they did, but specific feedback tells them what to adjust and why. Timely feedback is easier to connect to the action that produced it. Corrective feedback should be clear, respectful, and tied to the performance goal. The message is not simply "that was wrong." The message is, "here is the difference between the current approach and the stronger approach, and here is how to close the gap." Variation keeps practice from becoming memorized theater. If every exercise uses the same wording, same order, and same obvious clue, learners may pass the activity without recognizing the idea elsewhere. Changing examples, constraints, or decision points helps learners separate the underlying principle from the surface features of the practice item. That is where practice begins to support real skill. Motivation is not just enthusiasm. In a learning environment, motivation often comes from the connection between effort, value, progress, and the belief that improvement is possible. Learners are more willing to invest attention when they can see how the material connects to real tasks, real problems, or real goals. Relevance does not remove difficulty, but it gives the difficulty a reason. Confidence also matters, especially when learners are being asked to try something unfamiliar. Confidence does not mean pretending the work is easy. It means learners can see a path from where they are now to better performance. Achievable challenge helps. If the task is too simple, learners disengage. If it is far beyond reach, they may stop trying. A useful learning sequence gives enough stretch to build skill while still providing support. Psychological safety is important in many learning settings because people learn more honestly when they can ask questions, make mistakes, and correct their understanding without humiliation. Shame-based training can produce compliance in the moment, but it often reduces curiosity and hides confusion. Strong instruction is direct about expectations while still respecting the learner. It supports persistence by making progress visible and by treating mistakes as information that can guide the next attempt. Designers can support motivation by making the path visible. Tell learners what they are trying to become able to do, show a realistic example, let them try a bounded version, and then show how the next activity builds on the last one. Progress feels more believable when learners can see that each step has a purpose and that effort is producing a clearer approach. Transfer is the ability to use learning outside the original lesson. Near transfer happens when the new situation closely resembles the practice activity. Far transfer requires the learner to adapt the principle to a different context. Both matter, but real work often demands more than repeating the same example. Conditions are messy, information is incomplete, priorities compete, and the learner has to decide what applies. Courses support transfer when they include realistic scenarios, meaningful decision points, and context variation. Instead of showing only one perfect example, the learning experience can show several versions of the problem. What changes when the data is incomplete? What changes when time is limited? What signal tells the learner which method to use? Variation helps learners recognize the underlying pattern rather than memorizing the surface details of a single exercise. Job aids, checklists, examples, and workflow references can also support transfer. They are not a sign that learning failed. They are part of good performance design, especially for tasks that are complex, infrequent, safety-sensitive, or easy to confuse under pressure. The point is to help people use what they learned when the course is no longer open and the work has to be done in the real environment. A strong transfer question is, where will this learner first need the skill after the lesson ends? That question changes design decisions. It affects examples, practice conditions, language, timing, and support materials. If the first real use happens during a busy shift, a complex review, or a handoff between teams, the course should prepare learners for that context instead of only preparing them for a clean classroom version. Better learning design begins with performance. What should learners be able to do after the course that they could not do reliably before? Once that outcome is clear, the objective, examples, practice, feedback, and assessment can all point in the same direction. If the goal is decision quality, the course should include decisions. If the goal is procedure accuracy, the course should include procedural practice. If the goal is judgment, the course should expose learners to realistic trade-offs. Sequencing matters. Learners often benefit from concrete examples before abstract rules, simple cases before complex ones, and guided practice before independent performance. Summaries and reflection help learners consolidate what they noticed and connect it to future use. Feedback loops help them improve while there is still time to adjust. Assessment alignment keeps the course honest by measuring the capability the instruction was supposed to build. Good design also avoids information dumps. More content is not automatically more learning. A course can be comprehensive and still be structured, focused, and usable. Inclusive and accessible design strengthens learning by reducing unnecessary barriers and making participation more reliable across different learners and environments. The aim is not passive completion. The aim is to create conditions where people can build durable understanding and usable skill. This does not require every course to be elaborate. Even a short module can be stronger when it states a performance goal, uses a concrete example, asks learners to retrieve or apply the idea, and gives feedback that points to improvement. The discipline is to spend course time on the things most likely to change what the learner can do afterward. The main lesson of this course is that people learn through active construction, not passive exposure. They connect new information to prior knowledge, refine mental models, focus attention, manage cognitive load, practice retrieval, receive feedback, and apply skills in context. Each piece supports the others. Clear explanations matter, but explanations alone are rarely enough to create durable performance. Strong learning design is practical and structured. It starts with the capability people need, then builds a path toward that capability through examples, sequencing, practice, feedback, review, and transfer. It respects the limits of attention and working memory. It uses relevance to support effort. It creates confidence through achievable challenge rather than empty reassurance. It treats mistakes as data for improvement. The goal is not to make learners consume more content. The goal is to help them build understanding they can retrieve and skill they can use. When a learning experience is aligned with real performance, learners are more likely to remember what matters, recognize when to use it, and adapt it when conditions change. That is the difference between a course that was completed and learning that actually travels back to the work. As a practical takeaway, look at any learning experience and ask 4 questions. What will the learner need to do? What prior knowledge or misconception will shape how they understand it? Where will they practice and receive useful feedback? How will the design help them use the skill later, outside the lesson? Those questions keep the work grounded in capability rather than content volume.